Hello, and welcome to Grade.com Talks With. Today, we're talking with Mimi Bakshi, Vice President of International Programs at the People for Ethical Treatment of Animals Foundation, a UK-based charity organization dedicated to establishing and protecting the rights of all animals. And if you're new to our podcast, please press subscribe button either on YouTube or your podcast app, because today we're going to learn about an organization that is educating policymakers and the public about the cruelty to animals and promoting an understanding of the right of all animals to be treated with respect. Hello, Mimi. Welcome to Grade.com Talks With. We're excited to have you.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Wonderful. How would you describe PETA Foundation for someone who is not familiar with your work?
Well, essentially, we are a charity that's aim is to stop animal suffering. We work on a really simple principle, and it's that animals are not ours. They're not ours to experiment on. They're not ours to eat. They're not ours to wear, and they're not here for our entertainment. And we focus on those four areas because those are the areas where the largest number of animals suffer the most intensely for the longest period of time. And then we work through all sorts of different ways. So public campaigning and education programs. We lobby. We work for legislative change. We do cruelty investigations. And we also work with a lot of celebrities. I think that's how we first became known. Lots of other things. Corporate outreach has been a big one over the last few years, and public protests.
Mm-hmm. I really like the principle that you mentioned, that animals are not ours to take advantage of for different purposes. And that is the message that needs to be heard by more people, and more people need to realize that animals are not our property. And organizations such yours working in that direction gives us hope that future can be changed. What are some key issues in regards of animal rights that are very urgent today?
Gosh, there are so many. I think a lot of them would be solved if we could really understand and take to heart the concept of speciesism, which is this similar in principle to the other toxic isms like sexism, ableism, ageism, racism. It's that same sort of discriminatory idea that I am more important than you. And it allows us to do all sorts of terrible things to animals, things that we do to them in the laboratories that we would never contemplate doing to another human being, for example. And yet, when you think about who animals are, human beings are animals, for one. We're all the same in all the ways that matter. We all share the same feelings of love for our families and our communities. We all want to be free. We all are capable of suffering and feeling pain and loneliness and despair and boredom and all of those things. So if we could just open our hearts and expand our circles of compassion to see that we are all animals, and in all the ways that matter, we're the same, then the things that we do to them, we would stop doing to them. We wouldn't put them in factory farms and exploit them for their flesh or for their eggs or for their milk. We wouldn't put them in cages and kill them for the skin on their back. We wouldn't put them in tanks or so that we can watch them do silly tricks that to them has absolutely no meaning. All of those things we do, we're only able to do because of this concept that we have that we are somehow superior to other animals, which is so false. Animals are so smart. But I think that's changing. I think people are really starting to understand that. And especially now not now, it's been quite some time, I'm showing my age, with the internet. People are able to get much more educated by themselves than we were in the past. Before, we had to rely on what the news was telling us. And now we can do our own research. And I think Paul McCartney said this thing that has really stuck with me. If slaughterhouses had glass walls, everyone would be vegetarian. And that's really true. And as much as big businesses, animal agriculture, for example, have a vested interest in hiding what happens to animals from us. Now we can see what happens to animals by going online. People can go onto the PETA website, for example, and see the reality of animals' lives in factory farms and slaughterhouses, and make kinder choices. So I would say that to answer your question, I would say that one of the most important things that people can do is to educate themselves about what's happening to animals, particularly in the food industry, because that really is where the largest number of animals are suffering. And it's not just hurting animals. It's also hurting us. Look at the situation that we're in right now. This global pandemic is, a direct result of us exploiting animals in the natural world. And it's not the first time. We've faced many of these sorts of pandemics in the past. I think it was only over 10 years ago we had the swine flu that killed hundreds of thousands of people. And it's because of the way that we exploit animals. We put them together in these horrible tiny enclosures, and we castrate them. We cut off their tails. We tear away their babies. We pump them full of antibiotics to keep them alive long enough in order for them to be killed when we want them to be killed so that we can eat them. I mean, all of those things, of course, they have repercussions. And that's now we're seeing what can happen to us as well as to them when we do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the concept of speciesism, correct?
Speciesism, yeah.
Speciesism, yes. You mentioned that we have given names to other major topics, but now it's time to give name for this concept, so more attention can be brought up on this topic. And with the access to free information, with the access to the web, internet, now we can all educate ourselves about the cruelty that is happening across agricultural industry, across entertainment industry, across clothing industry. So that giving it the name and calling it is the great first step to education and taking action. We talked about, you mentioned several industries, including experimentation, food, clothing, entertainment. What is stopping the world to end using animals in such purposes?
I think, there's the main reason is the lack of education, I think. It's simply that people don't know. Because I think that most people generally would either, if they don't call themselves animal lovers, at least they don't want to see animals hurt. And they're not aware of how the personal choices that we all make impact on animals' lives. And I can use myself as an example. I would say that I have always been an animal lover. I've had cats growing up my whole life. We've had rescue cats. But I never really thought twice about eating a hamburger. And so I myself was a speciesist in that regard, in the sense that I loved my cats, I loved dogs, and yet I didn't give cows or chickens a second thought, really. And so I think that learning what happens to those animals is the first step, because when we know better, we can do better. And once I started to learn about, the devastating things that happen to these animals who are all individuals, I think that's when we're talking about animals, there's so many of them. It's such a big concept of, billions of animals being killed for food, for example. But every single one of them is an individual. Every single one of them wants to live. And we have it within our power to stop their exploitation. We have it in our power to stop them being killed just by the simple choices that we make every single day. We can, every time you do sit down for a meal, it's so easy now. I mean, when PETA started 40 years ago, like if you wanted to have milk in your coffee, you'd have to find some powdered soy and mix it with water. And then that's how you would make your coffee. And now you can go to the supermarket and you can have soy milk, oat milk, coconut milk, hazelnut milk, almond milk. The choices are just endless. So it's so easy to make kind, compassionate choices. And as people are learning, things are definitely changing. The last 10 years, even the last 5 years, there has been such a boom in vegan products. It's no longer, there's no longer, to me, I can't understand how anyone could possibly still be eating a beef burger when the plant-based burgers are so realistic. It costs us nothing to make that change, but for animals, it's the difference between life and death. So I think the main thing that has prevented us has been a lack of education. And also the industries that exploit these animals and have a vested interest in us not knowing are huge, very, very rich industries that spend millions and millions and millions of dollars on advertising and selling this false notion of how animals are treated in these industries. All of the advertising is you see animals in fields, they all look happy, and it couldn't be farther from the reality of what animals actually endure before they come to our plates or before they're skinned for leather and whatever else we're doing to them.
Mm-hmm. Yes, lack of education and a huge investment by industries in marketing that animals are safe, animals are not treated badly, they're here to give us food, is one of some of the things that are stopping the world to use animals for the purpose of experimentation, food, clothing, and entertainment. In entertainment, we can stop using animals in circus, in SeaWorld kind of attraction. Mm-hmm. For experimentation, we can stop using animals in experimenting. For clothing, there are so many different alternatives instead of using a fur. For food, you mentioned there's so much option that, today for the vegan food and other different options. However, there's still some people who prefer to eat animals and dairy products and meat products. How can we create safe spaces for animals in the agricultural industry so they're not exploited, they're not slaughtered in a manner that you mentioned about the Paul McCartney's quote being that it's devastating, it's scary. How can we create such spaces that is safe for animals?
The truth is we can't. If we're going to be raising and killing them, there's no way to make that safe. You can't humanely slaughter an animal that doesn't want to die. But there are plenty of alternatives to that. Not only the plant-based foods, which honestly, I would challenge anyone who says that they want to eat a burger because they think it's better. If they were to try a plant-based burger, I swear I would find it very hard to believe that they could tell the difference. They are so meat-like now that, the difference is so marginal, if you can even tell at all, that really killing an animal for that difference is just preposterous. But there's also a lot of food innovation. In labs, people are working on meat grown in petri dishes, so it's I believe in the not very distant future at all, that's going to be available for consumers to buy. If you really, really want to eat the flesh of an animal, you'll be able to, but it won't have come from a living animal. It will have come from a laboratory. And that's obviously better for animals. It's essential for the planet because animal agriculture is, one of the most environmentally destructive industries on the planet. And if we don't change the way that we eat, there's not going to be a planet left for us to live on. It's really that simple. I think anyone who, even if you don't care about animals, but you care about the planet, you simply cannot be a meat-eating environmentalist because meat is so damaging to the planet. And so if you have kids and you care about the planet that they're going to live on and their kids, we absolutely have to change our behavior. And that can start, as I said, with just the simple thing of swapping out chicken nuggets for vegan nuggets. It's really not hard. It's just, it's the easiest thing in the world, and it has such a huge impact. And also when you look at the things, being vegan is beyond just what you wear, what you eat. It's also what you wear. And people don't necessarily, I think there's less awareness about the way that animals are treated for their fur or their skin or their wool than there is necessarily about animals who are raised for their flesh. And that's something that where public awareness is growing. But leather, for example, is, well, of course, it's skin. So if it weren't treated with toxic chemicals, it would decompose, it would rot because it's an organic material. And so in order for us to produce leather, we have to have these horrendous tanneries that are not only terrible for the people that work there, it caused many of them to get cancer at a very early age, but it's toxic for the environment. All of the waterways around those tanneries are contaminated. And then, of course, it's killing animals. So these industries are just ugly in every way. They trade on exploitation and on death. They're destroying the planet. And there are alternatives. There are other ways of doing things. Now we have leather that comes from mushrooms and apples and pineapples and grapes and, all these things that are natural and nobody has to die for them. It just seems very logical that that's the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the food innovation, the clothes fashion innovation are some ways that we can create safe spaces for animals and protect their rights. That's very future looking, and I hope more action is taking those more investment goes to those industries, to food innovation and fashion innovation, that the extent of availability of alternative products will be much larger than the availability of the animal products. You mentioned that you work on public awareness, on public policy education, educating policymakers, and you also work with celebrities on addressing the animal rights issues. Can you please give us some examples of the impact that your organization has made recently?
Yes, I think the most recent example that comes to mind that was a big policy one was in France. There's a law going through. It's already passed the National Assembly, which is the lower house, and now it's going through the Senate to ban wild animals from traveling circuses and to ban cetaceans from captivity. In France, they still have marine land and a couple of other places that keep captive dolphins. And orcas. And so those places are no longer going to be able to breed those animals or to acquire new ones. And they need to work on a plan over the next few years to retire those animals to a sea pen, which will give them, it's not the ocean, it's not the vast ocean, but it's definitely going to give them more of a semblance of a natural life. They're going to be able to feel the waves and, have fish around them and just things that feel more like what their life should have been like to begin with. So that's something that we're really proud of. We did the same in the UK. England recently introduced a ban on wild animals and traveling circuses as well. So now no more lions and tigers are going to be carted up and down the country to perform tricks for people's amusement. And that took a lot of work. It took a lot of it actually encompasses all of those things that I was talking about. We had a lot of celebrities that supported the campaign. We did a lot of public protests. We worked with companies that were potentially sponsoring those places to stop doing that. We met with politicians, and we had education programs. So all of those things come together to, create the kind of campaigns that create, big changes for animals. So that's one of them. If you look at the fur industry or the fashion industry, we've accomplished some pretty great things there too. I think when PETA started, fur was kind of a fashion, like a status symbol, whereas now it's, just totally taboo. If you see someone wearing fur, it's an outrage. So, and that's happened over the course of many years, but now we've actually retired that first I'd rather go naked than wear fur campaign because we don't need it anymore. People know. So now we're really focusing on wool and leather and raising awareness about the cruelty of those industries. And we're having a lot of success there too. Stockholm Fashion Week, for example, went fur free and exotic skins free. Helsinki Fashion Week went a step further and actually have banned leather from the catwalk. So that's pretty great. And then we're seeing retailers adopt these policies against using animal fabrics as well. So a lot of work still to be done, but we're seeing some really, really positive changes in that area.
That's wonderful. The fact that both two countries, UK and France, with the influence of your campaign, implemented a new law prohibiting the use of animals in circuses. That's a step towards progression, as well as I would rather go naked before wearing a fur campaign, resulting in Nordic countries in their fashion weeks to stop using animal products in the clothing. That's a very meaningful result, meaningful impact that your organization is doing. If someone would like to support PETA, how can they do that?
Well, I think that, firstly, of course, you can go onto our website. Depending on what country you're in, there are different PETAs, and there's maybe more local information. For us in the UK, it's peta.org.uk. And there you can learn about how animals are used in all sorts of industries, but more importantly, what you can do to help, how you can take positive steps to lead a more compassionate lifestyle, which really has a big impact for animals. And I would say that that's the most important thing. Of course, helping PETA is great. If you want to give us some money, fantastic. We'll use it, in a good way to help animals. But the more important thing I would say is help animals by your own personal choices, what you're doing every day. Maybe just try our vegan pledge. We have a pledge on the website to go vegan for 30 days. We'll help you all along the way. Every single day, we'll give you tips and recipes and things to make it very easy for you. Just those steps that you can take in your personal life are the ones that I think have the biggest impact. For every person who goes vegan, you save around 200 animals a year. And if you teach somebody else to go vegan, they save another 200. That has a huge, huge impact as it ripples out. So start with yourself, I would say.
Wonderful. The link to PETA's website will be provided in the link in description. Personally, after our conversation, I will definitely reconsider my personal choices when it comes to animals in terms of food and clothing. And our conversation has indeed impacted me, and it has caused me to question my choices, and I'm sure it will do the same for our listeners as well. Thank you so much, Mimi. It was a great pleasure to get to know you and your organization, and we hope the best for you and for PETA.
Thank you so much for having me. And if you need any help with that, we're here.
Wonderful. For you listening, if you enjoyed this conversation, please press like and share button, because this will show the YouTube and podcast algorithms that this conversation is important. We need more action towards protecting animal rights and stop cruelty towards animals in terms of experimentation, food, clothing, and entertainment. Thank you, and see you in the next episode.